For over 6 centuries, the Habsburg crown ruled over a diverse mosaic of cultures, languages, and lands. But in 1914, a single bullet tore through the heart of Europe, and the old world would never be the same. This is the story of how an empire collapsed, and with it, a chapter of European history came to an end. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was born from tradition and diplomacy. Ruled by the Habsburg dynasty, it was a patchwork of over 15 ethnicities: Czechs, Hungarians, Slovaks, Poles, Romanians, Croats, Serbs, Austrians, and more. Vienna was the beating heart of this imperial machine, a city of operas, palaces, and political power. But beneath the imperial facade, tension simmered. Nationalist movements grew stronger. The empire was modernizing, but slowly and unevenly. In 1867, the empire officially became the dual monarchy, Austria and Hungary. This compromise calmed Hungarian elites, but alienated Slavic populations who longed for independence. The empire functioned, but barely. It was elegant on the surface, cracking beneath. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne, represented hope to some and a threat to others. He envisioned reform, inclusion, perhaps even federalization of the empire. But on June 28, 1914, during a visit to Sarajevo, he and his wife Sophie were gunned down by Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb nationalist. The empire's future was killed in cold blood. The assassination was the spark, but the fire had been building. Within weeks, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Alliances activated. Europe plunged into war. The empire's bureaucracy was complex and vast. Dozens of languages were spoken across its lands, requiring multilingual documents, signs, and school. There was an Austrian parliament and a Hungarian parliament, but many minorities felt represented by neither. Despite the cracks, the empire became a cultural jewel of Europe. Composers, architects, and intellectuals thrived in cities like Vienna and Prague. The elite danced in ballrooms, while peasants toiled in the Carpathians. It was a paradox of grandeur and fragility. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne, represented hope to some and a threat to others. He envisioned reform, inclusion, perhaps even federalization of the empire. His plans would have elevated Slavic voices within the imperial structure, but to nationalists, especially in the Balkans, he was an obstacle to independence. On June 28, 1914, during a state visit to Sarajevo, Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist, associated with the group known as the Black Hand. The shots fired that morning echoed across the world. The empire, already stretched thin, responded with fury. Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia refused full compliance, war was declared. Russia mobilized. Germany stood with Austria-Hungary, France with Russia. Britain entered. The alliance system turned a regional event into a world war. The old world, still dressed in aristocratic uniforms, marched straight into the machine guns of modernity. Austria-Hungary was woefully unprepared for modern war. Its army was a multilingual force, with poor coordination, outdated equipment, and little strategic vision. Commanders often did not speak the same language as the soldiers they commanded. The empire opened its military campaign by invading Serbia, but the war quickly turned into a bloody stalemate. In Galicia, they faced the Russians in a brutal campaign marked by horrific losses. The Battle of Limanowa slowed the Russian advance, but victories were rare and short-lived. The Eastern Front became a graveyard for Austro-Hungarian hopes. In some units, Desertion rates climbed to over 25%. Supply lines crumbled. Soldiers received rifles without bullets, uniforms without boots. In Italy, the Isonzo front brought more disaster. The empire fought 12 bloody battles against Italian forces. The terrain was mountainous and deadly. Thousands died to gain a few meters of rocky slope. Morale plummeted. Food shortages plagued civilians. In Budapest, bread lines stretched for hours. In Prague, whispers of independence grew louder. Ethnic groups questioned why they should die for an emperor who ignored their voices. Internally, the empire was disintegrating. The Czechs organized resistance through the Czechoslovak Legion. South Slavs envisioned a united Yugoslavia. Romania eyed Transylvania. The war not only drained the empire's strength, but also its purpose. By 1916, Emperor Franz Joseph died, the last symbol of imperial stability. His grandnephew, Karl I, inherited a crumbling realm. He was young, idealistic, and desperate for peace. Karl I sent secret peace proposals to the Allies, bypassing Germany. These proposals were rejected. The Allies demanded total surrender. Karl's gesture made him look weak to Berlin and treacherous at home. Meanwhile, revolution spread across Europe. The Russian Empire fell. Germany's morale collapsed. In Austro-Hungary, mutiny spread in the navy. The Cattaro Mutiny of 1918 saw sailors refusing to fight, demanding peace and justice. By 1918, the Habsburg monarchy had lost all credibility. Desertions increased. Riots erupted. Hunger was everywhere. Entire regions declared themselves independent before the war even ended. In October 1918, with defeat inevitable, national councils formed across the empire. In Prague, a declaration of independence was read aloud, founding Czechoslovakia. In Zagreb, South Slavs united to form what would become Yugoslavia. Poland was reborn. Hungary declared itself a republic. On November 11, 1918, World War I ended. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, once second only to Russia in size among European powers, had ceased to exist. The Treaty of Saint-Germain, 1919, and the Treaty of Trianon, 1920, formalized the empire's dismemberment. Austria and Hungary were reduced to small landlocked nations. Over 30 million people were scattered across new countries. Hungarians found themselves in Romania, Slovakia, Yugoslavia. Germans were isolated in the Sudetenland. Croats were uneasy inside a new Serb-dominated kingdom. Ukrainians found themselves stateless. This redrawing of Europe sowed the seeds of future conflict. The peace was not healing, it was punishment. Nationalist anger simmered across the region. In Hungary, the trauma became known as the Trianon tragedy, a national wound that persists today. Economically, the collapse was catastrophic. Industries split by new borders, trade routes severed, currencies destabilized. An entire imperial system vanished overnight, leaving behind confusion and poverty. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was gone, but its ghosts lingered. Wars of identity, fascism, and nationalism found fertile ground in the shattered lands once united under the Habsburg crown. The fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was not just the death of a monarchy, it was the end of an idea that a patchwork empire could survive through balance and tradition in a world rapidly moving toward nationalism and modernity. It was the death of salons and swords, of dynasties and diplomacy. The new Europe would be drawn not by emperors, but by treaties, guns, and ideologies. And yet, in its fall, we see the birth of our world, a world of nation-states, of broken identities, of unresolved borders. The Balkans would burn again. The Czechs and Slovaks would part. Austria and Hungary would become shadows of their past. The modern map of Central and Eastern Europe is a monument to this imperial death. Every border, every minority, every conflict carries a trace of the Habsburg legacy, both what was and what might have been. We often think of empire as an outdated relic, but its ghosts remain in museums, in memories, in the names carved into forgotten monuments, in the fears and hopes of a continent still trying to reconcile its past with its present. Vienna still sings, Budapest still glows, Sarajevo still weeps, but the empire they once anchored is dust in the pages of history. This is Dead Kings and Lost Nations. Subscribe for more stories that shaped the world we know today.